in order to be hybrid, we have to have employees trust that the workplace is safe.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Taking Care of Business. I'm Mike Katz, Executive Vice President of the T-Mobile Business Group. And today I'm actually here in person, joined by Amy Coleman, Corporate Vice President of Human Resources and Corporate Functions at Microsoft. Amy has spent the last 20 years at Microsoft in various HR leadership roles, and most recently, she's led the COVID response team for Microsoft and is leading the company's approach to hybrid work for over 160,000 employees across 177 office locations in 96 countries. Well, Amy, thank you so much for being here. Being here in person,
I know,
man, it's so
super
great.
fun.
It's so great to
Yeah.
see people again. So I know we were talking beforehand. I know that you are starting into the transition period of going back to bringing people fully into the office again, and really implementing a hybrid model at Microsoft. So, like, my first question is, how's it going?
Well, I think it's a good question. We're learning as we're going. We learned a lot during COVID, how much easier it is to, even despite all the sort of the sadness and the tragedy and the surprise of COVID, whatever that is now, 18 months ago, I guess. It could be maybe 16, 17 months. But we learned a lot about it sort of leveled the playing field. You guys might have had some of the similar. Nobody was in the office except for a few of our essential workers. So we quickly adapted and developed ways for everybody to connect and stay working and be productive. Now we're in that kind of that precarious yet really exciting time that we're saying, okay, we're going to embrace a really new flexible way of working, but we'd love to have people back and have people where they want to be, where they're most engaged. And so we're starting to have that. I think we have like a 10% of our workforce is starting to come back to the building. And Mike, similar to you guys, we're global, so we operate everywhere in the world, 190 countries I think we're in. So the state of the pandemic is so different based on region. So we're also learning that what we say to the folks in the state of Washington versus the US versus some other region has to look totally different. So we're doing that same thing as we go back to hybrid, is learning from the regions that have gone before us and trying to understand what are the principles, what's the best practices, what worked, how can we experiment as we go. So we're kind of, I think people are pretty optimistic. I think just seeing somebody in person that I just met is pretty fun. So I think there's lots of that. People miss each other, but they also learned a lot about themselves and maybe what they want different from their employer. And so we're trying to listen to that and move forward based on what we're hearing too.
Yeah, it is great to be back, but I've noticed that we may have forgotten some basic social.
Oh yeah.
So I've been in a lot of meetings where people are sitting there and there's long, awkward pauses.
Yeah.
Okay, who's supposed to talk next? Where's my mute button?
Yeah.
I think there's a little transition period where you have to figure all that out. Have there been any? You were mentioning best practices.
Yep.
Have there been any things that you have seen or the company's seen over the last year and a half that have been surprising and that you think will carry forward post-pandemic?
Yeah. Well, first, the awkward thing totally resonates. I mean, even shaking people's hands or not, or talking, everybody's sort of talking about if they're vaccinated or not and talking about masks. So I think we'll have some transition time there. But yeah, I think we, Mike, I was doing some work on what are the things in HR that we learned from COVID to hybrid. And, in the world that I live in, we like 3 things, because I think that's the only thing that I can even remember. But I think I came up with 15 or so. But sort of on that list, some of the things that surprised me is I think health and safety is going to sort of stay in tech. And it's not something, I've been 25 years in HR, but always in tech, and it's not something I've had to think about every day. If I was in a different sector, maybe manufacturing or something, that would be top of mind in HR. Not that I didn't care about employee health and safety, but in order to be hybrid, we have to have employees trust that the workplace is safe and healthy and that they can come back. And so that I think surprised me about how much that's going to be lasting. I think I had this structure in my head that COVID would end and hybrid would begin. And now I know we're going to be in some of that. If you look at what the CDC says, we're going to be in some sort of state of transition across the globe for the next couple of years. So that's been super important, is how do we actually, in order to do hybrid, how do we get people to trust us to come back? Some of the other ones are, managers. I think in the last decade, we've realized how important they are to employees' engagement, to your everyday experience is kind of all about your manager. We have I think somewhere around 22,000 of them worldwide. And so really focusing on that population. And instead of being hard on them for what they're not doing is how do we support them? And so we learned a lot through COVID and now through hybrid about we shouldn't expect managers just to know what to do if, you are remote, you have an employee that's remote, you have one at home and you have one in the office. What's the best way to have a meeting or a connection? So those are two things. The other one is listening to, I think about how important our listening systems are. And I'm not sure what you guys have at T-Mobile. I'm sure it's pretty robust, but we get a lot of feedback all the time. And so it's sort of about how do we hear what employees need and want, how do we balance it with the business and the culture. And so, we have daily pulses or daily surveys. We have ways to get employee sentiment. We have ways to get employee feedback. So that's been a super important part of this. That's been more of a surprise how much we actually relied on the employees to tell us what we needed versus us coming up with the idea and saying, here's, ta-da, here's what we think you need. Here's what they're asking for. And can we do that within our values, our business results that we want in our culture?
Yeah, that's interesting that, first of all, it's great to hear that so much of the policy was directed from employee feedback.
Yeah.
What were some of the big things that you heard from employees that are now a part of the Go Forward plan?
Yeah, I thought that question might be coming. I'm thinking about it as I sit here. I think well-being has become something that's, it sort of went from mental health is something HR and maybe leadership thinks about, and now well-being has become everybody's issue. And so that really came from our employees. Work-life balance. I mean, I know you've heard the terms now, we're living at work. The world, at least in COVID, sort of became shapeless. Your weekends look like your weekdays, your mornings look like your nights. And so I think we learned a lot from our employees about productivity was still really high, but they were suffering from collaboration. They needed more help with collaboration with one another. They were suffering some social capital loss. So, just like you and I, we sit down in a meeting or we walk to a meeting together, you tell me about your weekend and we build social capital. And so they were missing that part. So we started to really form ideas about how could we help them. So well-being is a big one that came from our employees about, I know you see our productivity or, sort of our dev check-ins are really high, but let me tell you about my day. Some of the things in the products that we've done is we've started meetings like 5 minutes after the hour and some other things that have been employee driven. Like, so we don't have meetings back to back to back to back. How do you do some things that help with the well-being of our employees? So there's been lots of feedback and lots of things we've implemented.
Yeah. It's funny, as you were saying that, I was thinking with my commute for a year being literally walking down the stairs into my basement, you forget like how much work, like for me, like how much work I did like just on my commute to work, like going to work or coming home from work, and that was like all gone. And then you're right, like the back-to-back meetings. I personally, and I know my people that I talked to on my team felt the same way, that it felt like you were working more than you ever had before because it was so hard to turn off. And going to the next meeting wasn't standing up and walking to another conference room. It was hitting a button on your screen.
Hoping you can run, get a water or get a coffee. Yeah, you saw the digital exhaustion. You probably saw it with your kids too. The ones that were on Zoom or on Teams all day long, and you saw that digital exhaustion. It's a different kind of we started to look into the neuroscience of why is it harder to be on video than it is to this, and I don't know lots about this other than what I'm going to tell you, but they talk a lot about how subconsciously I'm trying to figure out your body language when you're on camera all the time. So my brain is doing all these extra cycles to see if I can read your body language. And so we're also trying to combat what does digital exhaustion look like and how do we help people. But yeah, in your commute time, you probably had lots of time to think.
Yeah. Yeah, like it was like the only time.
Yeah.
It was like, Microsoft, I mean, you may have had some advantage in that the productivity tools that a lot of us used over the course of this last year, you all produce. I spent more times on Teams this last year than, in my entire life combined. Obviously, you guys have a great productivity suite, but as you were helping facilitate full remote work, and then now as you're coming back to hybrid work, are there other technologies that you guys are relying on? Were there technologies that you saw that weren't up to speed to support a large hybrid workforce that works across the world?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, I think teams, we were challenged just by the I think some of our competitors too had the same challenge, just by the utilization and how could we get that supported and running and reliable. I think we learned a lot early on. I think what's interesting is if I think about tools of the future, we have a future of work team that has like 50 research projects that I get to be a part of, really interesting ideas, way beyond what I could think of. But for the short term, I think if we look at the meeting rooms is really what we're looking at as far as how can we, I don't know about T-Mobile, but meetings are the way we work at Microsoft. And so how can we break down the physical space, the technology space, and the people space of meetings and make them really hybrid? And so I think if I look at products that are going to help, it's intelligent cameras, it's intelligent audio. I think there's going to be lots of interesting tools around collaboration that we haven't seen yet, that maybe won't be invented here, but we'll certainly hopefully be a part of it when it comes to, it's still hard to whiteboard and for you and I to brainstorm online. And so I think there's a lot of those tools yet to come that this pandemic and then hybrid is really going to push us to get there.
Yeah, with so many knowledge workers at Microsoft, did you find like broadband issues? Because I know, like for me personally, as soon as I was in an environment where all of my kids were doing school from home,
at the same time,
and then all of my neighbors, half of which I think work at Microsoft, were also doing work from home. Like my broadband, I couldn't even do a video call anymore. Was that an issue that you saw? Either in the U.S. or you guys are in so many countries. Like, was reliable broadband a problem for you in developing countries?
Yeah, I mean, I'd only be talking from my own experience, but certainly. And I don't know if employees ever know, is it a product issue? Is it a service issue? Is it a broadband issue? But certainly I think there's some opportunity there. And we certainly saw the sort of that digital divide about who had access. I mean, it just made it more and more clear about the lack of equity in the access across the globe. But yeah, it was certainly a problem, when everybody else is watching a video all at the same time. And I could tell I could get better connectivity as soon as school ended, the school day ended. And I don't know if you saw the same thing. And then as soon as the nighttime videos started, then it impacted me as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think all the big ISPs really struggled with it. They had never built models for this huge new peak with everybody consuming video. So I know it was an issue that we I think experienced a lot personally, but we also heard from a lot of our partners that they were experiencing. As you guys designed this new hybrid model, obviously your main headquarters here in Seattle, there's a lot of competition for talent, but you guys are so distributed in lots of markets that also have lots of competition for talent. As you were designing the model, how much of that went into your thinking about how this model needed to be set up to keep you competitive for talent coming into Microsoft? Yeah,
and I'd love to hear how T-Mobile's thinking about it too. I think, I don't know, Redmond is there's a big heartbeat here for Microsoft, and I think we've tried to push against it so many years, and we've done it. We've made hubs and certainly where there's critical mass around the world, but we still struggle. We still have, I think we had a bit of a fixed mindset around, okay, Mike, if you're going to take a job, you have to be in Redmond. And so I think this push to hybrid and the pandemic has sort of cracked that open, and that's no longer on the table. Now, we might be in some of the leaders' minds. I'm going to have to push a lot of people to say, no, why couldn't that be in somewhere else? Because I think where employees are, where they want to live is, in the community they want to be around. They'll give us more discretionary effort. They'll be more engaged. So can you make their careers happen and make that connection happen? So I think we're still learning that. We have a long way to go, but the companies that are going to do this right are the ones that say, how do we get to yes? How do we embrace flexibility? Now, also, how do we see all the different talent we could get that if they don't have to relocate? And they can have some critical mass and colleagues around the world. We get all dimensions of diversity that I don't think we were able to reach before. Because not everybody wants to live here. I mean, it was 115 degrees yesterday. It was crazy, but I love it here. But I have to remind myself not everybody wants to live here. So how do we make some of the things that make headquarters special and replicate those and really kind of deconstruct them? Like, what makes onboarding special here? What makes walking the hallways special? And so how do we think about that in other places? And then how do we actually make that available to the remote worker too? I think there's lots of opportunity. How are you guys thinking about that?
Yeah, I mean, pretty similar, and not unlike Microsoft. There's so many different kinds of jobs here, and all of them work is done slightly differently. There's some roles that really require close in-person collaboration, and we found even during the pandemic it was challenging to be as successful in a virtual environment as it was in a physical environment. There's other jobs where quite honestly, you could do them fully remote. And so what we've tried to do is make the answer more individualistic for the employee and their role. But generally, I can tell you for us, remote work and video conferencing was not a huge part of our culture pre-pandemic.
Same with us.
I think I literally maybe once a quarter did a video call, maybe once a quarter. And I think what we demonstrated during this is that we could be productive. And for us, in some ways, it was helpful because during the middle of this, we did a massive merger with
that's
Sprint.
Right. Yep.
And we have a much more distributed team, with big headquarters both in Bellevue, but also in Kansas City and in Frisco, Texas, and in Atlanta and in Reston, Virginia. So we've got a really distributed team now. And it was going to be necessary for us to be successful working with people in different physical locations. And I don't know that we would be as successful as that post-pandemic if the pandemic hadn't forced us to, adopt that work style. So we tried to make the answers more individualistic to the employee's job, but in all roles, I think we're going to be much more flexible.
Yeah,
much more flexible.
Sounds very similar. I mean, I don't, let alone a video call. I worked from home maybe occasionally if there was maybe something in the middle of the day for my kids and it didn't make sense to drive. But a video call was like unheard of. LinkedIn brought video calling to us. They did everything video on, and so we learned a lot from them. But you have to get used to it, right? Yeah. There's a lot of other dynamics to get used to. But I think we're very similar. I think we're going to find that flexibility is going to be part of our core. But it is individual, it is manager, it is role, it is location. We're doing a lot around team agreements. So if you have a big team, how do you manage if people want to be doing things differently all the time? Is there a time that you come together on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, on a quarterly basis? So there's a lot we can learn too from our field and sales and marketing folks who have done this for some sort of way for years. So
you mentioned a second ago some of the things that you're thinking about things to make coming back to the campus more exciting and maybe more attractive. Yeah. What are some of those things that you guys are doing, or what kinds of things are you hearing from employees that they're excited about, other than seeing people that they're excited about coming back to campus for?
Food. That is it's the most bizarre thing. So we keep, as I said, we tend to love feedback, so we do lots of surveys of what would bring more employees back, other than the health and safety. And so what would make the campus more welcoming, other than, so there was health and safety, and then there was masks, which, certainly Washington State, we're right on the precipice of that not having to be part of when you're vaccinated. But then there was having other people there. So how can you get other people to come in at the same time or on the same day or something? And then it was food. Yeah. And then getting around campus. We have a lot of, and then commuting in, there's, we have different buses that take people in. So people want that. They want movement and they want really good food back. So I don't know, what were your guys' tops?
For us, that's been one of the things. In fact, we were talking beforehand, we did this huge renovation of our campus. And quite honestly, we didn't have great amenities here beforehand. Now we have something like 10 restaurants, and we have a Starbucks on campus, and so I think that's been really attractive. Yeah. But maybe one of the most popular things, and we'll give you this idea for free, is we opened a bar. Oh, yeah. So
that's going to start happening. Yeah. It's Friday beer kind of Fridays, like sort of throwback in tech. So.
Yeah. So we literally have a bar upstairs.
That's awesome.
It's named Sidekicks, which actually is a connection between our companies because Danger was a company that you guys bought, and we were the ones that exclusively launched it. But the bar pays tribute to Sidekick, and
that's awesome.
We actually have a bar that just opened, I think, 2 days ago.
Oh, that's terrific. Yeah, we might steal that idea.
Yeah.
So, I do think people want to also come together. I just did something for my org last weekend, just outside, and they want to come together and see each other and remember what that feels like. There's something about the lived experience you need to experience going to the office, okay? Remembering what your commute felt like, remembering what it felt like to connect in person, remembering what it like to, eat from a salad bar that I didn't have to make. Those are all super awesome things.
Obviously, you're leading this effort for one of the biggest companies in the entire world. But there's lots of companies that are in various stages of planning their, return to office or their hybrid model. Like, what are some of the pieces of advice that you would give somebody in your position for another company as they are going through this planning process for how they're going to execute this at their company?
Yeah, the horizontal part of this work is huge. I mean, I've never worked with real estate and facilities as much as I have in this time. Is how do we, how do we get people home? Set up their home offices? What do they do with their stuff in their office? That was sort of all COVID, sending everybody home. And then how do we make an office of the future that people are excited about and want to be around and want to be part of? And then also making them hybrid. So like I said, cameras, we've realized that the conference room in America has been set up for people sitting together. And so how do we actually make it so if you're in another place, you feel like you're part of it? So that would be my number one advice, is to look at how you work and then start to deconstruct that and work with your partners. I mean, there's a huge tech part of this, a huge HR part of this, a huge legal part of this, and then a ton on real estate and facilities. It's been super, it's super fun to work across rather than sort of working in your silo. So, that would, and then, sort of having inclusion at the core of everything has been super important. Inclusion at the core of how we're thinking about meetings, how we're thinking about bringing people back, how we're thinking about the future. That was super important during this. And, looking at acute communities, families have had a harder time with kids and homeschooling. There's certainly a lot of acute communities that have felt have suffered more or have had more difficulty during these times. So certainly addressing those and seeing how we can help those people more as we return to work. But, I have this, like I said, this sort of very long list of sort of our HR game changers and our hybrid workbook that we're sharing with everyone. So that's the other thing, is it sort of transcends competition, is how do we all share our ideas on how we do this to get people back to work and to get the economy back up and thriving. So that's how I'm thinking about it, is I'm on the phone trying to connect with people saying, how are you thinking about this? And so experimentation and sharing is super important too.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's so nice to hear that, especially because you guys are such a huge part of the community. As
are you.
Yeah, and if this isn't successful at Microsoft, this entire community suffers. So it's so great to hear that it's been a collaborative approach. You mentioned earlier, kind of going back to your inclusion point, but you mentioned how much of the decision process has been inspired by employee feedback. What were the tools and mechanisms that you used to collect feedback from employees?
Yeah, I think we used our daily pulse, which I think I mentioned. It's 2,500. It goes out to 2,500 employees every day. It's a random selection, and we asked, we asked them the same questions so we can start to get some themes and some ideas. And then there's a lot of other ways for employees to give feedback. And so we try to bring together listening systems, both outside. We look at our internal tools like Yammer, we look at Twitter, we try to get where employees and their sentiment is. So a good example of us making that happen was around the families. I think we were addressing, especially women and families, saying, okay, here is some opportunities for some time off. So we instituted pandemic leave. You guys might have done something similar, but we realized we weren't listening hard because there was a lot of women that didn't want time off. They just wanted more help and support to be able to work. And so what we did is we kept that pandemic leave, but then we instituted tutoring and online schooling and places where you could safely drop your kids off to try to help. And it's both women and men, obviously, but we heard a lot more from the women about caregiving. How can we make caregiving part of our strategic priorities so we can hear from them about what is it that they need to, if they want to be working, how can we help them work? So we pivoted some of that to help them. And we used some of our platform to negotiate. We didn't go figure everything out. We just, used our relationships and said to other people and places, hey, how are you thinking about childcare and pandemic pods and online tutoring, in-person tutoring, and try to get that all together. So then as a parent or as a caregiver of maybe a parent, you could have a little package and say, okay, here's some choices that I have to, and the company's helped here.
Yeah, and will that continue post?
Well, I think there's a lot of things that we'll keep in place. And then there's some things that will sunset. We've instituted some well-being days. We're getting a lot of employee feedback to keep those coming. They feel a little bit different than, I don't know if you guys do vacation or paid time off, But yeah, I think we're kind of deciding now, like what sunsets in September, what sunsets next year, what have we learned, what can we do differently? Because I think we learned a lot from our employee base this year.
Yeah, especially that last issue, because I know that was one of the biggest challenges for our employees too, when you're simultaneously trying to do your job and be a teacher.
Yep.
And I know I was telling you earlier, I have a 4-year-old son who made a lot of cameo video appearances this year. Yeah. And he's super cute, but it also can be like hard and distracting and everything else. So
I have some famous golden retrievers now, yes, and teenagers that needed the car keys and money and things like that. But yeah.
I think the one nice thing, I won't say a nice thing, but the one kind of interesting thing about COVID is I do think it will be probably the only time in our lives, hopefully the only time in our lives, where we're all in the entire world simultaneously going through the same thing. And so there's like an empathy that you can have for everybody in these situations because everybody's going through the exact same thing.
It is amazing to think about at the same time sort of how the globe reacted. But yeah, it does build some empathy for, I think we built a lot of empathy at the leader level for what you're talking about is how do you teach kids and work at the same time? How do you have a two-income family that maybe both of them are frontline workers? I mean, there's a lot that we've learned and that we can help people more. I think both your company and mine can certainly help with that effort. So, yeah.
So we have a tradition here where we end these with a set of rapid fire questions.
Okay, we do these first at Microsoft.
Oh,
we warm up with these, you close with them.
Oh, we wanted to make sure we got to all the good stuff.
Okay, all right, got it. Okay.
So if you don't mind playing around,
I will.
We have some rapid fire questions. Talking or texting?
Oh goodness, texting.
Okay.
I mean, I have voicemails that are 100 years old on my phone that I still haven't listened to.
Well, you also have 4 teenagers, so
I know, right.
I don't know if your teenagers are the same way. But my kids literally don't know how to answer. They have 0 phone etiquette. They literally can't answer a phone.
I know.
I was like, you're supposed to say hello when I say.
They hand you the phone. Like, the panic. Yeah. So we got to teach them that, I suppose.
Okay, this is a really dangerous Puget Sound, Seattle area question. But tea or coffee?
Oh, coffee.
Coffee.
Yeah, lots of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Favorite gas station food?
Boy, well, one, I hate getting gas, so I try to trade a car, like really like on the low down, like, oh, can you take that car today? And it's on, the red light empty, so I hate getting gas. But I'd say anything sort of gummy-ish, gummy bear, gummy worm, something really bad for me sugar-wise.
Okay.
Yeah. Totally. What about you?
Ooh, I'm a big peanut butter person, so pretty much anything that has peanut butter.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's a good one.
Yeah, same thing. Pretty much anything that's bad, though.
Yeah.
There's really only one right answer to this question, so you'll see if you get it right. But favorite season?
Summer.
Yes.
Okay.
You live here.
The only non-gray season.
Yeah. We invest 9 months for this season.
I know, right?
They make us work hard for it.
Yeah.
We have to ask this question because you're here. First cell phone?
Oh, it was BlackBerry. Does that count?
Yeah,
okay.
I think so.
All right, is that okay here? It ages me though, I think.
We had BlackBerries
here. All right, okay, fair.
That works. First job?
First job. This is a super interesting job. I don't know how I got it at this. Well, I know how I got it, but I was sort of the receptionist, hospital operator in the emergency room. And so I manned the switchboard, and I don't know, I felt like I was 12, but I called people and, told them to get on the phone, and I had a big switchboard in front of me. Now I am 100 years old, but that is my first job. Beyond restaurant, I worked a lot of restaurants all through college and grad school, so yeah.
It was a different time. There was different labor laws then.
Thank you.
Dream dinner guest?
Oh, one of our interns asked me today who I would want to interview. I said Amanda Gorman because I would love to be able to talk like she did at the inauguration, or Michelle Obama. I'd like to talk to her. Dinner guest, that would be super fun. Yeah. What about you? Am I allowed to ask you back?
Yeah, you can.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, you're breaking the rules.
I know.
End the interview.
T-Mobile rules.
I just had, we do a program here called Talking with Trailblazers, and I had the good fortune of hosting it last week, or a couple weeks ago. And I got to talk to Laverne Cox.
Oh.
Yeah, and she was
Wow.
amazing.
Yeah.
She was really, really amazing. And just
That's so fun.
just an amazing person with an amazing story and
Yeah.
amazing perspective on life. And so I would
very
love
cool.
to do a follow-up dinner with her. So if you're listening, Laverne, she just started a podcast too. So
Okay, there you
I'm
go.
assuming she listens.
I'm
to
sure
mine.
she is.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to ask this question, hoping that it doesn't get you in trouble. But Windows 10 or Windows Vista?
Windows 11. We just
Windows
launched
11.
it this
Okay.
week.
All right. Windows.
Yeah, I won't get in trouble. Don't ask me my favorite product, though. So.
No, I'm just kidding. That one's not on here. Amy, thank you so much.
Yeah,
it was so great to
my
have you
pleasure.
here. It's wonderful, like I said, to see you in person. Thank you for everything that you're doing in the community. Thank you for everything that you're doing at Microsoft. I obviously, since I live here, I know a ton of people that work there, and they absolutely love it. And I know that you're a big part of helping create that culture there.
Well, thanks. It was super to talk to you, and thanks for having me. And I look forward to connecting more. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
For our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. And as a reminder, for each episode of this season of Taking Care of Business, we're excited to expand our Project 10 Million donation to a school district of our guest choice, making further progress towards bridging the digital schoolwork gap. See you next time.